Hey everybody, welcome to this Bible study. Today we're taking a look at Proverbs chapter 1, verses 10 through 19. If you were here for this last session, we looked at verses 8 and 9 of chapter 1. And if you remember, I mentioned that technically there's one whole package from verses 8 to 19. And that we were going to break it up into two videos, 8 and 9, which we did last time, and then 10 through 19, which we're going to look at this time. But before we dive into verses 10 through 19, I want to do a quick recap and read 8 and 9 one more time so that we can remember the context, tie it in, and then we'll dive into verses 8 through 19. It says this: "Hear, my son, your father's instructions, and forsake not your mother's teachings, for they are a graceful garland for your head and pendants for your neck." Now, what's important about that for this session is that the instructions and the teachings that will be a garland and a pendant, all right, are going to begin to unfold in verses 10 through 19, and then it will continue to expand and expand throughout the rest of the book of Proverbs. So verses 10 through 19 are going to be a garland and a pendant if you will listen and you will apply. All right, and so that's where we're going to dive in at verse 10. So let's dive in and take a quick look. Okay, verse 10 through 19, what we're going to do is we're just going to read it as usual, and then we're going to dive in and begin to break things down a little bit more, okay? So it begins off like this: "My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, 'Come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent without reason. Like Sheol, let us swallow them alive, and whole, like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all precious goods, and we shall fill our houses with plunder. Throw in your lot among us. We will all have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Hold back your foot from their paths, for their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. For in vain is a net spread in the sight of any bird. But these men lie in wait for their own blood. They set an ambush for their own lives. Such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessor." Okay, let's dive in here and start breaking these down. First, I want to note that we have, just like last time, the audience here. We're going to have children, and we're going to have parents, all right? Now, this is going to apply, one of these two is going to apply to you no matter who you are. If you're a child, this is going to apply to you. Last time, verses 8 and 9, we talked a lot more about parents, principles that parents could take away for their home. Today, we're going to talk not to parents as much, other than, hey, parents, note what we're going to say and teach your kids these things. That's really the biggest piece of information we're going to speak to parents. Everything else we're going to speak to children, which encompasses all of us. But this isn't talking to children in relation to their parents and how we should relate to parents. This is actually talking to children, meaning the audience is everyone, because no matter how old you are, you can apply these things. And no matter what season of life you're in, you're going to be able to apply these things as we look forward. So it says this: "If they say with us, let us lie in wait for blood." Okay, so there's two things I want to note here. First, I want to note, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, "Come with us." Okay? So what's happening here is super important. We've got these two things are connected. Okay? Here's the word I want you to remember: peer pressure. Peer pressure. Okay, I'm going to write that down. That is what the author is warning against. In a nutshell, is peer pressure, okay? Why is that? Well, first, let me note, you may be tempted to read this text and see things like wait for blood right here, or let us ambush the innocent without reason. And you may be tempted to read these and say, look, this doesn't apply to me. Like, I don't have friends who are this extreme in their sin. Okay? But that would be a grave mistake, because it's not about It's not about the extreme nature of the act. Okay, what this is saying here is I'll identify a couple words for you that are important. Sinners. Sinners. So whether we're talking about enticing to sin small, maybe watch a filthy movie, listen to filthy music, or sin big, maybe grand theft, whatever. However we want to contrast, the point is we're talking about someone who is enticing and influencing you to sin, period. This enticing and this language they have here with come with us, okay, is what we would call in modern language peer pressure. Now, parents, you have children who are in 8th grade, 9th grade, middle and high school, right? And even young adults in college. You are in a stage of life where you are trying to fit in, where you are trying to find yourself. You are trying to find your people. You are seeking to avoid the pain and bitterness of rejection among your peers. That is really one of the top priorities of your life when you're in this middle school through college years, right? Especially your undergrad in college anyway. For most people, you're looking for your identity. You're looking to, as I said earlier, avoid the pain of rejection. Okay? And so what you're going to do is you're going to find the crowd that will accept you. And you're going to do what it takes to be accepted by them and not risk being rejected by them. So the problem here is oftentimes the crowd that will accept us are enticing us to sin in various ways, in various degrees. And what the author is communicating to his son and the broader audience is avoid these types of people. Avoid these types of people. Do not get caught up on the extreme language of the sin. He's using an extreme example of sin: bloodshed, ambushing, theft, all of these things, right? We're going to get to another principle down here, unjust gain, in just a little bit. We're not there yet. But for now, we need to zero in on this principle of if there is any sort of peer pressure from a social group to sin, flee. Do not compromise. You say, oh, they're influencing me to go party, to drink, to try this drug, to engage in sexual immorality of various kinds. Because that's the thing we do amongst these people. It's not as extreme language as being used right here, but there's an enticing to sin. And we want to run from that. Okay? But why? Okay, he's gonna tell us when we get down here. Let's just finish up real quick. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait. Verse 12, like Sheol, let us swallow them alive and whole, like those who go down to the pit. Okay, I don't want us to get hung up here. Okay, because again, this is describing an extreme example of sin, but this replace this with anyone. Like with anything, if they say, come with us, let's go party. Come with us, let's go steal. Come with us, let's go do this. If you are seeing this and you're involved in gangs, right? Maybe this does apply to you and this isn't very extreme for your context or for your life. And the gangs are the only people that you can find acceptance with, right? I would say flee from that. That's what the author of this text is also saying. Flee from that. Verse 13, we shall find all precious goods. We shall fill our houses with plunder. Okay, so here's where we're getting into the unjust gain. Okay, that's our first hint at unjust gain. Verse 14, throw in your lot among us. We will all have one purse. Okay, here's something I want to stop and say. I'll write this down here for us. Okay. Watch where you invest. Watch who you invest with. Okay? This is what verse 14 is getting at here. Throw in your lot among us. We all have one purse. Okay. It is incredibly important, just as the Bible instructs us not to be unequally yoked, right, with spouses, with people in our communities that we do life with in close degrees, right? We should not be unequally yoked with business partners, with people who we're seeking to invest with, we're seeking to engage in risk, but we're also seeking to invest in a business that has the potential to act in a way that's immoral or in a way that takes advantage of people. If we are unequally yoked with the other partners, we run a grave risk of being put in a position that is subjects our financial investment with our morality and our ethics and our conscience, okay, and living Christ-like and doing things according to his nature. And so avoid the pressure. Like they come to you and say, hey, we got this sick opportunity. You're going to make 10x on your money. Again, this is what the Proverbs is saying, is avoid the peer pressure and avoid being enticed by sinners, okay? And I love that the author put in here this little segment that refers to even investing. Like, let's say you're not up here in verse 12 or verse 11, right, where it's like bloodshed and ambush and all this. Maybe you're just involved with the peer pressure to invest with people you know have different morals, ethics. They don't serve the Lord. They're not as interested in serving the Lord and walking in his ways. He's saying don't be enticed even in investments, even as a silent investor where you just put in money. That's especially dangerous because the company, you have no say in the company. You just threw in money and they're going off making the decisions and you have no consultation. And if they are not as eager to walk in the ways of the Lord, maybe they're taking advantage of people, and then you invested in that. You invested in the business that would eventually take advantage of people or rob people or act immorally or do whatever. And so the author is giving out several different ways of, hey, don't be enticed by sinners, period. No matter if it's small or great, do not compromise. Do not. That's what the scripture says over and over again. Don't turn either to the right nor the left. Keep your eyes fixed straight ahead on the way, right? Walk the way of the Lord, right? And so I think sometimes we can take this word sin and we can paint examples of sin that are very small and then go to the other end of the spectrum to a very great example of sin that's very extreme and say, well, we would obviously never do that, but we compromise on the small stuff. Right, and so there's small sins, there's hidden little things in our life, and that we're much more likely to be enticed to go with a crowd, whether it's just a petty movie that we're watching that is just filthy, right? Or as I said earlier, maybe it's music or maybe smaller things. So I want to encourage you: do not compromise, do not even invest with people who are not eager to uphold the righteousness of the Lord and walk in his ways and share his conduct, okay? Let's jump now at verse 15. My son, do not walk in the ways with them. Hold back your foot from their paths, okay? We have a nice contrast, right? What path then should we walk, right? We hear this text or hear this phrase all the time. The way of the Lord. All right. He'll make for us straight paths, and we want to walk in the way of the Lord. So their paths, I love this. He contrasts and connects, rather, not contrasts, their paths with evil. So if their paths are evil, what would the Lord's way be? Righteousness, purity, and things of that nature. So peer pressure is a trap. Peer pressure is a trap. That is, if I could, in one sentence, sum up what the author is wanting to get through to his audience, it's that peer pressure is a trap. Do not be enticed by sinners. Hold back your foot from their paths. Instead, remember, their paths are evil. Instead, engage in the paths of the Lord that he makes straight for us. Okay, verse 16, they make haste to shed blood Verse 17, for in vain is a net spread in the sight of any bird. 18, but these men lie in wait for their own blood. Okay, so here's some good information. They lie in wait for their own blood. Now, notice this word. It's important. This word right here, but. Okay, so this word but means we're kind of like flipping the coin. Okay, so we've been talking about all the negative things, right, up here that in verses like 12 through 17 that these sinners might be enticing you to do. Now he's saying, but listen to this. All right, I'm going to give you the flip side of that. They say acting this way and doing these things, we're going to get rich and all of these things, it's going to work out in our favor. I'm actually going to flip the coin, give you the other side of the coin, and this side's going to be true. All right, but these men, what they're actually doing is they're lying. They lie in wait for their own blood. They don't lie in wait for the blood of people passing by so that they can rob them, right, and get rich unjustly off of their the property that they've stolen. They set an ambush for their own lives. Okay, so they lie in wait. They think they're going to get rich by beating someone to death and stealing their stuff. They think they're going to get rich by ambushing someone. And what the author's saying is like, don't be deceived, okay? You reap what you sow. So if you're going to lie in wait for the blood of someone else, you may be successful in that particular mission. You may bloody someone up and steal all their stuff and walk away with unjust profit. You may successfully ambush someone. But what you're actually doing is setting up an ambush for yourself. So why? Why, Solomon, should I run away from sinners who entice me? Why should I run away from peer pressure? Why should I accept gladly the rejection from sinners, right? Even though it may hurt or sting when someone rejects you, a community, your social group rejects you, why should I run away from sinners? Because listen, when you are being influenced to live unjustly, you're going to reap what you sow. This is why back in verses 8 and 9, a garland for your head, a pendant for your neck. What that means is you will live life successful, peaceful, beautiful. Things will go well for you if you listen to these instructions and apply them to your life. But if you don't, you will actually be lying in wait for your own blood, and you will be setting up an ambush for your own life. So we can see the contrast between a garland for your head, a pendant for your neck, and then your own bloodshed and your own ambush, right? So we see the contrast. You listen and obey, garland for your head, pendant for your neck. You don't listen, you're going to ambush yourself, and you're going to set up your own destiny for bloodshed. Verse 19, such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. This is a powerful word here. Greedy, okay, for unjust gain. Powerful, okay? Why? It takes away the life of its possessor. That's powerful. It takes away the life. Unjust gain takes away the life of its possessor. This is powerful here. Now watch, there's two aspects. You can be greedy, but your greed isn't necessarily unjust gain. You're greedy for maybe your own accolades, your own honor. You're greedy for your maybe something as petty as your own food. You're greedy for wealth. You're greedy for possessions, materials. You're greedy for a lot of things, but you may not specifically be greedy for unjust gain. You see, there's a group of people that exist in the world who are not just greedy, but they're willing to gain their wealth unjustly. You have, scammers, people who steal other people's identity. It's fascinating to me that those who steal other people's identity, that's a hard job. Like all the stuff they have to do and all the coding and hacking and how they have to divert, like stay under the radar and things like I'm like, well, if you're willing to work that hard, why don't you just go work that hard and earn an honest living? And the reality is that it's that there's a greed for an unjust gain. There's a greed for these things, and when you're greedy for unjust gain, meaning you gain at the expense of someone else. It doesn't even have to be you stole from them. Like, this is why forced labor is an issue. That's unjust gain, because you're getting rich off of the backs of thousands and thousands of people living in poverty, right? So this forced labor and inhumane labor is unjust gain, and there are people who are greedy for unjust gain, right? We need to be. I'm a big advocate that people. I think the term is reliably or responsibly sourced. I think that's the term where you use companies who manufacture their goods that they're selling to you, where they're paying people a fair wage, where no one is abused, right? Because that would be more, they get less profit, but it's just, right? Versus these big companies that are operating with forced labor, and they're using miners to build all of this stuff, and then they go and make a ton of money off of it. That would be unjust gain. And scripture is telling us it takes away the life of its possessor. It takes away the life of its possessor. Who's the possessor? The possessor of the unjust gain. Okay? So all in all here, peer pressure is a trap. Peer pressure is a trap. Always 100%. Well, you say, well, what if someone's pressuring me to do righteous and walk in the ways of God? That's not peer pressure. That's influence. That's godly influence. Peer pressure has this sense of, like, a sales sense of, like, where it's like, if I don't do this, there's consequence, right? Holy influence woos people in. It's attractive. It doesn't force. It doesn't coerce. It doesn't entice. It just displays, right? It's the garland and the pendant. It's like you look at this holy way of living, and by nature, you're attracted to it. Peer pressure is not influence. It's pressure. It's coercion. It's something that will always conflict something deep down inside of you, your conscience. You'll always have that, even if it's subtle, even if you've denied your conscience so much to the point where you don't even recognize it, right? Peer pressure pushes you into something that your spirit, your conscience, it was born to question. It was born to, like, with this feeling that this isn't right, all right? So we want to find the people who will accept us where we're at, but influence us in the right direction. Do not be enticed by sinners when they say, come with us. Whether it's small or big, run the opposite direction. Be okay with the rejection of sinners. You know, the Bible says that something to the effect of being rejected by man but accepted by God. That terminology is used, okay? And that is the Christian life. Rejection is never easy. Doesn't matter if it's being rejected by a sinner, someone that you don't really need to be around, or if it's being rejected by someone that you admire deeply and love. They both stings. Obviously, one stings a little bit more than the other. There's no getting around. No one wants to be rejected or feel that bitterness. But when you can replace your rejection by sinners, when you choose not to go with the crowd, you choose not to be a part of the peer pressure, even though this is the only group that accepts you, because that's really why you're doing it. And realize that you may be rejected by man, but you are accepted by God. It is so much better to be accepted by God and rejected by man than to be accepted by man, especially sinners, and rejected by God. So the author here is communicating peer pressure is a trap. Look for people who are wearing garlands around their head and pendants around their neck, and seek to be influenced and guided by them. I hope this has been beneficial for you. Until our next one, God bless you guys.